Welcome to the Walk in the Park podcast, the official podcast of the Lead Up Task Force of SAGES, the Society of American Gastrointestinal and Endoscopic Surgeons. In Season 1, we will be taking a look behind the curtain of the C-suite, sitting down with individual CEO, CMO, CFO, CNO, and COOs of a diverse range of physician practices and hospital systems. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to stay up to date on the latest episodes. Enjoy the show.
Today, we have the honor of speaking with Dr. K. Kelly Hancock, the Executive Vice President, Chief Caregiver Officer, and Chief Administrative Officer at Cleveland Clinic. Previously, Dr. Hancock was Executive Chief Nursing Officer for Cleveland Clinic and Chief Nursing Officer for the main campus, a dual role she held for 9 years. Dr. Hancock is a pioneering leader holding the Rich Family Chair, Chief Caregiver Chair. It's a mouthful. And she plays a vital role in shaping the caregiver engagement strategy for over 81,000 caregivers worldwide. Her extensive experience and innovative approach to leadership, coaching, and organizational development make her an invaluable resource for understanding how physicians can effectively collaborate with nursing staff and executive nursing leadership. Dr. Hancock has dedicated over 3 decades to serving patients and communities at Cleveland Clinic here in lovely Cleveland, Ohio. Her impressive educational background includes a Doctor of Nursing Practice from Chamberlain College of Nursing, and she is a distinguished member of various professional organizations. Her accolades include a number of awards recognizing her contributions to healthcare leadership. We're absolutely thrilled to have her on the podcast today to share her insights on leading up and enhancing physician and nurse collaboration.
Dr. Hancock, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. To kick things off right away, and so that we are not talking because no one wants to hear me and Kevin talk, trust me, that we'd love to hear a little more about we heard the story, but a little more about the background and how you ended up in these roles as the Chief Caregiver Officer and Chief Administrative Officer at Cleveland Clinic. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, firstly, thank you both for having me today. It's certainly an honor to have this conversation with you. So a little bit about myself. I've been with the Cleveland Clinic for 32 years. I am, as mentioned, a registered nurse by background, and I've had the opportunity to serve our organization in a variety of different leadership roles in my tenure here. In fact, out of those 32 years, I've held a leadership role 28 of those years. So again,
started right away, huh?
I did. I started as a very a young leader, and so it's really been a privilege to grow and develop alongside some great mentors in this organization, and of course from other organizations as well. And so I've been the chief caregiver officer for the last 5.5 years, and many of you may or may not know that the employees of our organization are referred to as caregivers. And this is something that Dr. Toby Cosgrove put in place at the time under his tenure of our president and CEO, that no matter what you do in the organization, you contribute to the care of our patients. And so that's why everybody's been called a caregiver. And then following in his footsteps, Dr. Tom Mihalovich, who is our leader, our current leader of this organization, he had the vision of creating this newly established role for the organization with the mindset that healthcare is a team sport. And when you think about our model here, going back to 1921, we are a physician-led organization very proudly. And we're also known for our team of teams approach delivering healthcare. And he envisioned a role that had overall governance of all aspects of our caregivers, no matter what they did in our organization. So at the end of the day, that as an individual contributor, as a caregiver or a member of a team, that you felt that you could be your true best self and that your contributions mattered. And so it's been a wonderful opportunity. It was created really at the beginning of the pandemic, and we were focused appropriately so on our patients and our caregivers who were impacted with COVID. And I thought it was really a good time to do it now that I look back at it, because it was really bringing all the different centers of excellence together to support our team so they could show up and be their true best self. So at that time, I was the system chief nursing officer, was mentioned in the opening remarks. So of course, I replaced myself with a very competent leader, Meredith Fox, who's assumed those duties, and she reports under this office as well. Most recently appointed also the chief administrative officer, again with the mindset of aligning all of our administrative colleagues together with common mission and goal, and ensuring that we're supporting our businesses and our stakeholders with the most appropriate support from an administrative standpoint.
That's amazing. I'm going to lean a little bit on your 28 years of leadership,
Sure.
and ask a little bit about the evolving role of nursing leadership in healthcare organizations. I mean, obviously, you've lived, many decades of seeing the evolving leadership within the nursing field. So, talk a little bit about that. What's your perspective on how that's evolved in 28 plus years?
Yeah, I think some things have stayed the same, don't they? Particularly in healthcare, and certainly from a leadership standpoint, it has evolved. So when I think about nursing leadership in particular, some of the things that have stayed the same from my perspective and my experience is that the need to have nursing at the table. And as nursing leadership and has evolved over time, I think more and more the focus on the growth and development of those nurse leaders so they could appropriately be at the table providing the most valuable insights is something that's important for all healthcare organizations. And so I like to think about it in like three buckets, if you will. And I think the evolution of nursing leadership has allowed us to continue to focus on diligent planning and being that partner with our other colleagues in the organization. So when you think about the strategy for a healthcare organization, it's critical to have the voice of the nurses and the nursing leadership, because if you want to align clinical priorities with the overall organizational goals, really to support your long-term success, executive nurse leaders in particular must have a seat at the table so they can provide the insight. I think it's important, and I continue to, double down on this today. It is so important to have exceptional leadership at every level. So from at the front line, at the nurse manager level, all the way up to the corporate level, because in this environment today, I mean, we can go back over time, it is important to ensure that we can guide our teams through this rapid change that we've seen. And then we think about the future and what's in store for healthcare. You need to have leaders who are present. And I always say, leaders show up. They show up, they're visible, they show up to be supportive, to remove those barriers. They show up to be responsible. A lot of people talk about accountability, and I agree about accountability, but I also think first it comes responsibility. And I think about the evolution of nursing leadership is to be responsible to grow and develop the next cadre of leaders and frontline caregivers so they can give the highest quality of care that our patients deserve. And I think being present with those who are providing the care, so whether it's in the ambulatory space, the OR, nursing units, that's where they need to spend their time. And the last thing I think I'd add around that is the importance of nurse engagement. When you think about the complement of caregivers in an organization, a healthcare organization, majority, and not surprisingly, are nurses. And with this shortage that we've had in cycles over the years, the engagement of keeping people of that high caliber, high talent at the bedside is so important to delivery of care. And that's where nurse leaders need to really focus their energy and create the environment that allows us to shape the work that we want to see.
That's fantastic. I am as someone who has the privilege of working with some very strong nursing leaders every day as my dyad. My dad actually, and you'd mentioned in our listeners don't know, you mentioned beforehand that you have a previous history of the cardiac surgery world as a
Yes.
nurse. My personal dyad is actually also a former cardiac surgery nurse. So um, it's I think it's I understand the benefit, and some of us who have the privilege of working with strong nursing leadership understand that. But for our fellow members who don't have that opportunity, who are kind of looking as they're kind of the everyday physician going about doing their work, and they see you and others in these leadership roles, how would you recommend to them to employ to get these strong relationships, to foster these relationships with their nursing staff, the nursing leadership. Like you said, we're a team.
Yep.
A physician nurse team, there's no stronger team than that, and it has to work
Great.
well, has to work hand in hand. But it is easy for us to talk about that because we live that every day. The kind of the bread and butter everyday surgeon going about their business, who wants to have a positive impact in the world around them.
Mhm.
How can they do that besides the normal relationships they have? Kind of, they have their team, but if they were to approach you per se, how do they build those relationships from
Oh,
their perspective?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's no important relationship outside the patient provider relationship is then the physician and the nurse. And so, over my time here, I certainly have learned that. I mentioned earlier in my remarks about the mentors that I've had, and many of it are physician colleagues. And it's because of those relationships that you build with one another, the trust that's established. And to have that, you have to engage in regular dialogue. And I think speaking transparently and being authentic with one another about what's working well and where we have opportunities only fosters that. And it does begin at the bedside. I can go back, early on and being a cardiac nurse and having those conversations, with my physician partners, even some, the trainees, of course, and starting early because we know that when you have that open dialogue, you can work better together to impact the care to the patients. And so understanding where each is coming from their perspective, working to solve collectively together what they're trying to accomplish, I think is a good first step. And so what I've seen work very well is establishing common goals with one another. And you mentioned the dyad. I remember back to some of those cardiac days when I was in a leadership role, we had established a true physician nurse partnership on the different nursing units on the acute care side of the house. And those were so powerful because it showed both teams, our physician colleagues, as well as our nursing colleagues, that were coming together to have shared goals, a shared vision. These are the things that we're working on. So anything from quality, safety, experience, throughput, you name it. We know it was in the betterment for the patients and their families and the organization. And by the way, you enjoy working with one another and you enjoy the people that you work with together. So that regular dialogue is so important. And I think as the nurse physician team, if you will, recognizing as a team the impact that you have at the system level or the hospital level, because it goes beyond the bedside and it influences so many different things. And so those are the two points I would mention that I think are very important as you think about that type of relationship.
Yeah, that goes further than I think any specific lesson is just working together and building
Yes.
those relationships like you talked about. I think there was someone who once said it's hard to hate someone up close. Like the closer you get, like it's
That's
easy
right.
when we're on an email or behind a screen or to get angry and that. But when you're like working together and you're sitting together, it's hard to get too angry because you realize that you're actually after the same thing.
It's funny because we were reflecting the other day on this. Before there were, our phones that we were tethered to, our iPhones, there was the Blackberries and
Mm-hmm.
the introduction of all that. But before all that, we just had our pagers.
Yeah.
And that was the way we were able to connect with one another. But it didn't get away with didn't get in the way of having those conversations. And sometimes that's what I worry about, that it's easy to get behind an email or behind a text, although
Mm-hmm.
convenient. And what you miss is the richness of that dialogue and that connection. So it's interesting to see how that's evolved over time. Yeah.
Yeah. You're again just leaning on your leadership lessons. I mean, you started quite early and have built that up. What advice can you give to physicians who are looking to develop leadership skills? And the name of this series is a lead up task force. This is the first season on our podcast where we're looking at ways to engage within healthcare organizations, and one of the ways that our prior president, Christopher Schlachta, has kind of termed that as leading up. Like how do we develop those skills? How do How do you formally do it? Do you informally do
Yeah.
it? Both? What are some strategies that you would
Yeah, I
recommend?
could speak about what we do here at the Cleveland Clinic, and I know many of our colleagues across the country have similar approaches, but we have focused education for our physician colleagues. And so whether they're novice in their roles, they aspire to be in a true leadership role, our chief of staff here, and we call our physician staff, is Dr. Barry Ridgway, and she and I partner, and we have this Center of Leadership and Development, where again we focus on those career pathways for our physician colleagues, along with other stakeholders within the organizations, to ensure that there's intentionality around some of the skill sets and competencies they need to be successful as they go throughout their career, and providing them then those experiences. And so what I've seen been impactful is not only taking the courses and being present and active and engaged in that development opportunity, but taking that and applying it. So we're very intentional when we think here about succession planning at all levels, and getting people, particularly our physicians and our nursing colleagues and other administrators. I'll take a step back, but your question was around physicians and making sure they're prepared to take on whatever is next. Because as I mentioned, we are a physician-led organization and very proud of that. And we like to grow our own and make sure they're prepared for the next opportunity that comes available. So we give them those experiential opportunities. So whether it's leading a initiative for the organization around quality safety experience, one of our business goals, if it's giving them an opportunity to lead a larger group of individuals, and then again providing them not only with that didactic piece in the classroom, if you will, but also provide them with an executive coach. That has seemed to be very impactful. And it may sound like not everybody can afford an executive coach, and that's not what I mean. We have a cadre of individuals here that are trained appropriately and have the appropriate skill set that go out and coach a variety of our different leaders for scenarios to prepare them, so for those upcoming roles. And that's been something I would encourage people to take advantage of if they have the opportunity. Fundamental to all of this, physician and non-physician, in terms of leadership opportunities, is ensuring that we have effective communication. So going back to my earlier comment about prioritizing open communication in any interaction you have with different stakeholders is key to early leadership success or opportunities. And so being mindful to create regular opportunities for dialogue around what matters most in your organization or your area of work is important.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just one of the things that is impressive about your role is obviously overseeing such a large number, 81,000. I mean, soon it'll be 100,000, I'm sure, as clinic continues to grow. How do you determine, how do you do the leadership selection process? Is it self-identified, like a surgeon recognizes that they are there ways, like how do you maybe make it smaller when you're dealing with so many caregivers? Like how do you identify those who would benefit from
Sure.
leadership development?
That's something that's so important for us. It's a priority. It's a priority for Dr. Mihalovic, our leader here, because he knows the importance placed on that. And so, as I mentioned, the talent reviews that we do, you may or may not know that we have obviously clinical institutes here in the organization, and each clinical institute leader, the chief of the institute, does a talent review, whether it's with the department chair or the chair of the department. And they go through their top talent who's expressed an interest in pursuing a leadership opportunity. And then we have rich dialogue on how to prepare them and get them that experience. And so we do that on an annual basis. And then it really all rolls up to our CEO. And it's really an interesting process to watch, because I have the fortunate opportunity to be a part of that. And so the different groups will come in, obviously with our chief of staff leading that. And they'll say, these are the individuals that have expressed a desire to, explore leadership. This is where I think our rising stars are. And these are the recommendations that we have for them to, take on some developmental opportunities or formal education. The courses that I mentioned that we hold here are for our global footprint. So not just here for Northeast Ohio, but our colleagues in Florida and in our other global locations come in as well. And from those reviews, those talent reviews and succession planning, oftentimes there are individuals who are recommended to take part in these courses that we provide, and some of which are a year-long fellowship. So not only are they there as an individual, but they have an opportunity to network with other colleagues across this global healthcare system to kind of form this sense of community as they're going through this together. And so I really enjoy and appreciate the continued support from the organization, because in the times that we've had in healthcare and will continue to have with all the competing priorities, perhaps financial constraints, those are one of the things that are easy to say, yeah, we can't do it this year. But we know how important it is to invest into that leadership.
I mean, that sounds great. It's, it's so important to be able to do that
Yeah,
and really lay out a nice kind of framework. So let me ask you kind of a little spin on that. Since you've
yeah.
identified people, you kind of have a good way of home growing leaders. But what are some of the more common challenges you see physicians facing when they're trying to influence change, right? So, surgeons we know we're not subtle creatures. If there's an issue, we're happy to raise concerns, but it doesn't mean that's the most effective way or influential way. And take the normal surgical non-approach to it. And what other, you have these developmental, programs, but
Mhm.
what have you seen kind of as they go through it? What are the challenges they face that they can be
Yeah,
aware of when they're trying to make change like this?
you're absolutely right. I think aligning stakeholders is one of the challenges. And so oftentimes where I see some stumbling blocks or challenges is, how do you achieve consensus? So whether it's amongst administrators or nursing colleagues or other departments, and sometimes that can be challenging because we're subject matter experts sometimes in our own, not sometimes, oftentimes in our own clinical domains or areas of expertise. And so perhaps when you have an idea, you may be, well, they're just a cardiac surgeon or they're just a colorectal surgeon. How could they have insight into, whatever it is, the initiative? And so achieving that consensus sometimes can be difficult. I think, for our physician colleagues, balancing the clinical and their operational priorities could also be a challenge. So many of our physician leaders also are clinical, and for them to have that balance and manage patient care responsibilities while at the same time leading and advocating for systemic changes can create time and resource constraints, and so they have to find that balance. And then, lastly, I would say time. I think that's an opportunity, going back to the point I just mentioned. I think managing the amount of change that we want to see with demanding patient volumes, you just mentioned earlier in the conversation, scheduling, it can be a challenge for everyone in healthcare. And so those are three things that I often hear. But again, I think really achieving consensus would be one of my top ones.
Based on what you've seen work and not work over the years, and as you look into some of the future strategies, technologies, software, AI, all of these things that we keep hearing about,
Yes.
what do you imagine some of the future collaborations between physicians and nursing leadership and healthcare systems? How do you imagine, what do you think is going to happen in the future? I guess I'm asking you a little crystal ball question, but you've seen a lot, you've seen stuff work, you've seen stuff not work. What do you think going forward as part of the collaboration?
I think from a collaboration standpoint, I said some things are just fundamental, no matter the time. And it's about that, again, prioritizing open communication to establish that relationship and creating those regular opportunities. And I think in the future, that's going to be necessary, particularly what's ahead of us in healthcare, because we're going to have to lean on one another to leverage talents to serve our patients and to serve the organization. When I think about the different technologies that are here today and that what's possible in the future in terms of automation, obviously and leveraging I think ensuring that we have everybody at the table so we can understand that it is a team effort, and how do we leverage um, these resources appropriately to augment the care that we want to provide to our patients or augment processes that influence our organization is going to be a top priority. I think about right now, the AI scribe. Our organization has trialed the Ambiance AI scribe in our ambulatory setting for our provider colleagues. So for our physicians and our advanced practice providers, and that's gone extremely well. And they will share with us, it's been a game changer because it frees up time to allow them to be more present with the patient. And that's obviously why they went into medicine. And as we think about how do we bring this into the acute care side of the house, it's going to be important because of all these different competing priorities that our teams have, which they have on the ambulatory space, of course. I think the nurse team dyad is going to be critical to ensure success of these resources so we can optimize them to their fullest. You know, the healthcare workforce shortage is not going to go away. It's gotten better since the pandemic. But when you look at the predictions and everybody's doing their best to develop those pipelines, and there's a lot of initiatives and programs underway, but they're going to exist. And we are going to have to leverage some of these resources to help us do what we want to do in healthcare. And so coming together, partnering on these initiatives to improve patient outcomes is going to be important. So building, you know, my idea would often be, we've talked about here often, is ensuring that the education we provide by discipline clearly is important from a leadership standpoint, but how we provide the education for them to partner together is even more important because that's what's going to be needed for the success of healthcare in the future.
So I think that's a great point. It's great kind of looking at how to approach it. So I'm going to take it a little bigger now. So
Okay.
as we've talked about, you know, from the nursing kind of perspective, then working physician nurses and kind of building off that. Now let's take, and we're going to take advantage of your roles and look at it from a system-wide approach, right?
Okay.
So how can entire organizations, you know, prepare for these challenges that lie ahead, you know, fostering interdisciplinary teamwork? Say they don't have they don't have those leaders. So what can they do, or what can the surgeons who are in those organizations help suggest for them to do that from a system level view? You talked about kind of drilling down to the individual
Yeah.
people, but now let's take a step back and look at it from a system level
Sure.
and, you know, kind of setting that culture from that standpoint.
I think first and foremost, if they don't have leadership development in their organization, I would encourage organizations to invest in that. And again, how they train, how they educate, how they focus on those collaborative skills together, conflict resolution. There's many programs that are out there that you can have organizations come in or you can develop your own. I would also, I think what's been really important from a global standpoint is ensuring that you create a structured communication channel, establish very regular interdisciplinary meetings, councils, forums to align goals across the organization. Um, we've seen that was so powerful, particularly during the pandemic, and we were able to enhance those communications channels, over our system over time. And again, going back to our last point about leveraging technology and data, many of our organizations are very rich in data. We need to use it. I would also say that from a global healthcare standpoint, what we did, and again, credit to Dr. Mihalovic when he assumed this role nearly 8 years ago, is he realized the depth and breadth of our organization and said, you know, how as leaders are we going to get our arms around all that happens in a day and have those touch points with our colleagues who are providing the care in our other areas. So he established these tiered daily huddles. And I know many people have daily huddles. But we have a 6-tier huddle, and it's an opportunity that started at the front line every single day, you know, 7:30. It's very structured, it's very efficient, but what matters most, what happened in the last 24 hours in your organization, in your area of focus. So it could be in an OR setting, ambulatory on the inpatient side. That information then is flowed up to the next tier, if you will. And the final tier is at tier 6, which is our CEO and the rest of the executive team. And on a daily basis at 11 a.m., we go through in a matter of 15 minutes everything that's happened within the last 24 hours in our entire global healthcare organization. So again, this is a structured framework, and it's an opportunity for us to look at any hospital-acquired issues that we have as it relates to quality, safety, experience, throughput issues, patients that we're serving, anything as it relates to workplace violence for our caregivers. And it has really been a powerful tool for me as a leader, and I can speak for the rest of my colleagues up here because they've also channeled the same type of appreciation for that opportunity. But I think more importantly, from a caregiver standpoint, no matter who you are as a caregiver, they feel that their voice can be heard at all levels of leadership in the organization. And at the end of the day, from a global perspective, if you don't have that framework from those who are doing the work, it's easy for you and I to make a decision if we're not out there every day doing this, but it's not going to be impactful. You need to hear from those who are closest to the work, and that's allowed us the opportunity to know what's happening with our caregivers. At the end of the day, our people are our greatest asset, and so you have to ensure that you have an environment where they could be productive, they could be fulfilled, and that their voice is heard.
I think that's a great approach, and I think I appreciate you laying out kind of the framework and
Yeah.
ending with what you just said there about the focus really is your people are your greatest, asset you have. But let me twist that a
Yeah,
little bit and make it a
please.
challenge because you have a great system there, and I think it's fantastic and it makes total sense. But that first level of engagement, I think, is the trickiest part sometimes. So you just mentioned shortages. We are inundated with everything and anything. AI is now telling us, how to do things, or I mean, there's even jokes about how the AI is more compassionate than some of the physicians when they write their notes and stuff. So, with all of this dumped on surgeons and nurses on that front line, you in your role on that sixth tier are looking for the information coming from the front line. But how do you engage them? How do you get them to want to engage or feel like they have the opportunity and time to engage when they have all of these clinical pressures or other pressures as well? Because as we know, shortages means they're just taking on a bigger burden
That's right.
clinically. So
That's
how do
right.
you provide that ability and make them feel that they actually are? I mean, you in the end are showing
Well,
you're hearing their voices, but how do you even start that, making them to
you
believe
know
it?
what? You're absolutely right. Everything you said is absolutely right. And we've recognized that. And my answer would be it's not a solution. So that is just one tool in our tool belt is, that huddle process. Other ways that we gain this feedback and be present is we're out often. I mean, all the time. We're at all of our hospitals rounding. Our CEO is very visible and we go with them. We go on the units, we go in the areas, we go in medical record keeping offices. We really touch base with all the caregivers. We have town halls, and they're not your structured town halls where you have the planted questions in the audience. These are raw questions. These are things that are top of mind for our caregivers, and they'll tell us, which I think is great. We also have these monthly operating reviews across our markets, in our clinical institutes, and our shared services, where we come together to talk about common shared goals that we have, and really being honest with one another about what's working well, where we have opportunities, and holding one another accountable. And then I would also say that from a clinical standpoint, this is something that's not new. I think it's obviously been here since the beginning of time in healthcare, is again going back to our original discussion, our original point in this conversation about the importance of the physician nurse relationship, particularly at the bedside. So we've doubled down on our efforts around, our plan of care visits, ensuring that everybody's on the same page as it relates to the care that we're providing to, or the plan of care that we're providing to our patients. And obviously the patient and their family feel that they have the confidence in that plan. And that's really where that modeling of behavior comes at a variety of different levels of the organization. So it's not a one solution approach by any means. You have to look at a variety of different things. Recently we just had a pulse survey here, and I know many of our organizations do employee surveys, or ours is the caregiver survey. And for a pulse survey, we use Press Ganey, and they share with us that normally 55% is the normal participation rate for all the things that you just described. People are busy, people are, I don't have time to take a survey. And this year, again, we had 81%. So we heard over
Wow.
58,000 voices. And so what
That's
does that tell
remarkable.
me? Participation is the first step in engagement. And so it'll tell us what's working well and where we have opportunities. And it's up to us as leaders is to really use that data wisely and just remember that is one piece of this big puzzle that we have to put together from a strategy standpoint.
That's awesome. I think you have given us some real gold as it relates to the physician nurse leadership dichotomy. It wasn't hard for me to pick who I thought should be the CNO representative, and I know that you've subsequently even blown past that role. But getting the fun fact, getting to work on seeing your leadership when I was there at the Cleveland Clinic as a proud alumni, it's really something that I think will be super helpful for not only our listeners but also our organizations who are trying to step up in areas that are really, really challenging. And so on behalf of the Lead Up Task Force, I just want to thank you for taking this time. I know it's a very busy, packed schedule, but I think it'll give our listeners a lot of advice on how to improve communication between executive leadership, nursing leadership, and even at the frontline level as well. I think you've given us tons of advice, and we're really appreciative.
Well, I thank you again. It's certainly been an honor and a fun discussion. So thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Kelly.
you.
Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
And that concludes today's Walk in the Park episode. We hope that today's discussion provides you with both resources and motivation as you lead up in your practices and organizations. Follow us on X, Instagram, or your favorite social media platform at Sages_updates. Tune in again next time and reach out with any thoughts on how to improve the podcast. We are open to suggestions. See you next time. Where do dads store their jokes?
Where, Kevin?
In their database.
Yuck, yuck,
That's,
yuck.
yeah.